Perfect. So I did want to welcome everyone to the future of work in the age of automation. David is going to be taking questions on what the future of work will look like and what skills young people will need to acquire to find jobs in an ever more challenging labor market. David, I'm just going to give you a quick introduction so everyone does know who you are. So David Timmis is a keynote speaker focused on the impact that AI will have on the future of work. He has a master's degree in business administration and management and public policy and work experience in the private, public, and NGO sectors. He has guest lectured at renowned universities such as Cambridge University in the United Kingdom and the College of Europe, and delivered presentations on a diverse range of clients, including Google and the European Commission. David has been recognized as an influential leader by the Association to Advance Collegiate Schools of Business and included on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list in Romania for his work to equip young people with digital. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you, everybody, for joining this session. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm calling from sunny Brussels, which maybe some of you are aware of, or maybe even coming from Brussels or Belgium. I'll spend, as I said, around 15 to maximum 20 minutes on actually presenting to you a deck, a presentation with the future of work in the age of job automations. The presentation I presented to various companies, NGOs, and other types of organizations. It's a great way to set the scene before we go into, I hope, what will be a debated and engaging Q&A session in which I will be able to hopefully answer all of your questions, or at least refer you to the right place to search. I hope everybody sees my slides, and if you don't, I do count on you, Melissa, to be my eyes behind the scenes, because I no longer see the chat. So if anybody writes in the chat, I cannot see it anymore. So how did I start this presentation and the whole discussion about the future of work? I've been working in this space, as Melissa said, for quite some years at Google, with the World Economic Forum, delivering presentations on the topic, working at the grassroots level with various organizations who are helping people be reskilled and upskilled. And over the past few years, I've been increasingly asked more and more to write and speak about this topic by also not just media publication and event organizers, like I'm speaking for today, for YMCA and the organization that you guys all know and apply to attend this event for, but also for young people like yourselves that, I have friends and acquaintances who come up to me and ask me what does the future hold for their jobs and for their work. And my usual answer is that there's no certainty and basically nobody can predict what jobs will be in the future, but we can have actually a fairly good estimate of what will these skills be in the future, what will these future-proof skills be. So after giving you a lay of the land, a state of play, as I call it here, of what the job area looks like and how skills are perceived in Europe and beyond, I'll actually narrow down on the skills part towards the end of the presentation to really showcase what are the skills that I believe and other researchers believe that are relevant for the future of work. So the state of play, some key trends regarding jobs, and there's a focus on Europe, but obviously these trends with variations to the numbers are I would say they're replicable in many places around the world, given the context we live in. So the first one, in Europe, around 22% of jobs, which is around 51 million, were at risk of automation. And this is a stat from McKinsey & Company from 2020. 26% of them are now at risk of COVID-19, which represents another 59 million of them. If you add these two numbers together, 59 and 51, it gives 110, which is actually the number of people whose jobs are at risk in Europe. To give you an even bigger picture, this is basically 50% of the people of the jobs, in Europe today are at risk of either automation or COVID-19, which I would say it's quite worrying. What is maybe even more worrying is this graph, again, from a report from McKinsey & Company, which showcases that if you look at the sort of light blue square here, 24 million of these jobs I mentioned, of the 110 million, so 24 million of them are at risk of both COVID-19 and automation, which means factory workers, delivery ladies and gentlemen, they are at risk actually twice because of the health crisis, the ongoing health crisis, and automation, which has been increasing over the past 2 years. So these are the sort of vulnerable people we really have to do a better job at taking care of, because they are our frontline workers in many cases, as we've seen in the pandemic times. So what are the jobs most at risk of displacement from both COVID and automation? We see the sectors that have been most affected. It's, as you'd imagine, wholesale and retail, manufacturing, accommodation and food services, the sort of jobs which were already displaced by things such as robotic arms and robotic process automation software. But now with COVID-19, also a further disruption to these sectors that require people to work in a face-to-face environment, to be physically present, which obviously in COVID-19 at the height of the pandemic was not possible. So many people working in these sectors have lost their jobs and are still unemployed over a year after the beginning of the pandemic, which I think, again, it's quite worrisome. When it comes to the skills, and what's the lay of the land when it comes to these skills that are required to be efficient in the current times we live in, we have actually 21 million European workers that might need to be reskilled in the next 8 to 9 years. And what's also more maybe urgent is the need to upskill around 90 million Europeans. And the difference between the two are very often not made clearly enough for the general public. So what I would do is now to spend 1 or 2 minutes to explain what's reskilling and upskilling. So for those of you who are not familiar, reskilling is the opportunity that somebody is provided or finds outside of his or her sector. So for instance, you work in marketing, and because your department or company has been disrupted, after you go through a government provided or company provided training, you're able to learn a completely different skill, be it HR or finance, and move to a new company in this new department. Upskilling, and the reason why more people will need to be upskilled is, again, to give you the example I mentioned earlier, with you work in the marketing department. By upskilling, it doesn't mean you have to change job or career altogether, or even department. It just means you have to learn a new skill, maybe data analysis to do your job, your marketing job better, or maybe you have to learn a new digital advertising program to help you automate some of your tasks. Again, this is an example of upskilling in which you would stay in the job but have to learn some new skills to continue to perform and to be successful in the role. When it comes to the occupational mix, this continues to change, as we can see here. So in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a huge demand for STEM professionals, for people with law degrees, business degrees, but also, as we've seen in the pandemic time, for people who are nurses, doctors, and even education providers, teachers, professors, and so on and so forth. So a mixture of, I would say, technical and rather human-to-human professions. When it comes to the other side of the spectrum, if we look at the jobs that have seen decreases in terms of demand, we see production work, office support, clerical roles, or customer service and sales support. Jobs which require repetitive, mundane tasks which are already being automated by software. Or jobs that are dangerous in factories, which are already replaced by robotic arms and robots in general that are replacing some of these workers. So if you have the chance of working more with your cognitive elements, with your mind, you're probably going to be on the left side of the spectrum. If you're working a lot more physically with your own body, with your own limbs, it's the sort of job which in some cases might be more at risk of automation in the coming years. When it comes, actually, these were the professions. When it comes to the skills that have been seeing an increase over the past years, we see almost a replica of what I've just showed you with the professions. We see tech skills, so again, STEM professionals being on the rise, social emotional skills that are needed in everything from business, legal, healthcare, or education sectors, smaller increase with hiring cognitive skills, and definitely a decrease when it comes to physical and manual skills. As I mentioned, working in factories, working with maybe food service, in which you have to pack sandwiches, these are jobs that are already being replicated by robots. Or basic cognitive skills, the sort of skills you would use as a secretary, as a person doing admin clerical work. Again, such skills are already replaced by robotic process automation. So reskilling, which is probably the harder of the two between upskilling and reskilling, and also the one that is, even though not impacting as many people, is definitely one which is more urgent, because if somebody loses their job because of automation and COVID, in most cases, he or she will need a reskilling. Otherwise, if upskilling would have been available in his or her company organization, they would have probably not lost their job altogether. So reskilling is very, very important. And we actually see that now across the globe, the issue is growing. It's growing in importance and also in terms of complexity. In the US and China, 1/3 of the workforce will need to learn completely different skills from what they currently use. And then in Japan, the problem is even more severe. Half of the population will need to learn completely different skills by 2030. The good news is that both companies and governments are doing something about it. First of all, some examples from companies that have, over the past few years, pledged millions or billions of dollars into helping their own workforce and the communities where they operate to reskill themselves. We see examples here from Amazon, who's retraining their own employees. We see examples from JP Morgan Chase, which again is helping to equip its employees with more technical skills that are in high demand. Or Walmart, which is investing in training programs and increase of wages for their frontline workers. So there's been initiatives happening, and we've also seen that such initiatives from private companies can be really implemented at speed and at scale if there's a big enough challenge confronting them. We've seen now with COVID-19 how apparel manufacturing companies like Brooks Brothers and New Balance have completely switched some of their factories to produce surgical masks and retrain people from producing garments to surgical masks. Same with car manufacturers, which have started using their factories at the height of the pandemic in 2020 to produce ventilators from car parks. Bank of America is just one of the many banks who's retrained, reskilled employees from other departments to help the customer support department, which was bombarded with calls, again, at the height of the pandemic. So we've seen that if the challenge is big enough, the private sector is not just willing, but able to reply in due fashion and to really reply quickly and at scale. The sort of reply that they will need to use if the reskilling problem continues to grow as big as it's growing now and as fast as it's growing now. So in other words, if there's a will, there's a way from the private sector. So what does the future hold for skills, and what are the skills that I think are the most relevant for you guys to learn in the coming years? The future of skills, which I would say would make you successful both professionally and personally. And some of these group clusters, the skills clusters as I call them, would not surprise you. Probably the first two you all heard of, and probably maybe even more too often. People skills or soft skills. And I've actually only mentioned 4 of them here, which I think are the most important, the foundational soft skills, the 4 C's: creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. These are skills that the government in Finland has implemented across the primary, secondary, and higher education curriculum in Finland to make sure everybody has a good foundation of soft skills, and also the soft skills that the Obama administration adopted as well when he was in power in the US. Digital skills, which maybe some people call hard skills as well, and there's a very important differentiating factor here. Digital skills people confuse with advanced and basic. There's actually this differentiating element between them, because most of us will need to acquire basic digital skills, the use of Microsoft Office, the use of Google Suite. However, not all of us are equipped or passionate about data science. And even though it is important, and you'll probably hear around you people recommending you to learn AI or coding or data science, it will not be needed in all jobs. And if you don't have a passion for it, it's fine to just focus on the basic skills to make sure your basic digital skills are on par with what is needed on the job market. However, obviously, if you have a passion for something a bit more complex, definitely your chances of getting a successful, well-paid job will increase dramatically if you learn how to code or to program. And finally, the cluster maybe, which is my personal touch to the typical future-proof skills, is the growth mindset skills, which is inspired by Carol Dweck, a famous researcher and professor from Stanford University. And I included here the sort of skills like flexibility, adaptability, resilience, and grit. Exactly the sort of skills that all of us have hopefully increased over the past year since the start of the pandemic, because these are the skills that will enable us to be successful regarding of what other pandemic or global crisis will come within our lifetimes. These are skills that unfortunately education providers and higher education institutions have not maybe put in a curricula to develop. It's actually the sort of skills you mostly develop for volunteering and for doing extracurricular work, as opposed to learning some of these skills from maybe even your job in some cases, depending on what work do you do. So all of them are important, but I would particularly ask you to emphasize the growth mindset skills in the coming years, because these are the sort of skills which could give you an extra edge in whatever job or industry you will work in. And I will actually stop here, because the other part of the presentation has a lot of focus on what the future holds, maybe in the short term after COVID-19. And if time allows it, I'm happy to go over it. It's maybe another 10 minutes, but I would stop here to see what questions you have regarding the broader picture I painted here for you, which is the future of work in the age of job automation, which was already happening before COVID. It has only been accelerated because of COVID. So I'll stop here, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can also see the potential questions you have. Let's see if I can do that. Stop sharing. Okay. So, any questions regarding what I've just shown you, or in general about the future of work, reskilling, upskilling, job automation? I'll be happy to take now the time we have available to discuss openly with you.
So we have a question in the chat here, David. So
Okay.
Charlotte is asking, how do we keep young people motivated in a time where jobs are becoming automated?
Perfect. I'm gonna see first of all also where I can see this chat as well, or is it because it's easier for me to see the question as well, but for some reason I didn't see it anywhere.
So it should be just on the right-hand side under chat, polls, people, and Q&A. So there would be chat there.
Yeah, I'm in the chat now. Okay, I see Charlotte's question. Okay, perfect. So how do we keep young people motivated in a time where jobs are becoming automated? Well, it's the problem, or I would say the issue I have with this question is, it's not how do we keep young people motivated, is maybe how do we keep ourselves motivated, because I think motivation has been a huge issue for people across different ages, backgrounds, and genders, especially in a time in which COVID has many cases forced us to just stay at home and not be inspired by a trip or by a meeting with friends. So I would really put again this question to each of us, or how do we each like to keep ourselves motivated? I cannot speak for everybody, but for myself, I've tried to make sure that in this very unusual time, I actually spend the time that was given with myself to really reflect on the things I want to do in the future, in terms of work, in terms of personal development, to work on some of the skills I never had a chance to work on, to potentially do online learning courses. So these small things, these small wins I managed to pull off over the past year have made me more motivated and kept me going in some of the more tougher times of the pandemic. But again, this question, I would first of all pose it to each of you in return, and also to make it, how do we, each of us, keep ourselves motivated, not how do we do it with other people, because I think it's really hard to motivate other people if you're not motivated yourself, which in many cases is the problem with what happened during COVID-19. So hopefully I partially answered your question, Charlotte, with maybe more questions. But okay, we have another one from Lloyd. I'm wondering what you think about thank you, Charlotte, about the recent world political dynamics in making sure that the workplace remains human-centric. There is less and less incentive to keep jobs human. I mean, I would disagree, actually, Lloyd, if I may, because I think there's a huge incentive still, and as I've shown from these skills I think are important, there's still a huge incentive to keep jobs very human, and that many of the jobs that have increased over the past few years, as I said, are jobs which depend on really the sort of emotional skills that I don't see within our lifetime that we will be able to embed in AI and robots, the sort of empathy, gratitude, curiosity, things which I think are really hard to replicate by a machine, at least with the existing technology. So as much as indeed STEM roles and tech-driven roles are growing, and probably fastest growing, equally so healthcare workers are also in higher demand, professors are in higher demand, and all of them, they require mostly human-centric skills beyond the technical skills that each of them needs for their job. So I think there's actually a high time for developing our soft skills, as long as we do have, as I said, a basic digital skills as well covered. But soft skills will be important within our lifetime, so keep focusing on them if you are already. Yeah, I think the algorithms that are mimicking human feelings too are still pretty far away, I would say, from what they would need to be to really replace us in the workplace. I mean, I'm well aware of deep fakes, I'm well aware of the advancement of the technology, but still, I don't see it as a big risk, at least not in the, as I said, potentially not even within our lifetimes, or definitely not in the next 15 to 30 years. It's because humans will most likely, in all cases, prefer to see another human being in front of them when they do certain things. When they are taught by a professor, they would still prefer an interaction with the human, or with the doctor as well. Obviously, the future will help enhance the role of a doctor or an educator, maybe with the software, maybe when it comes to a doctor, and this is already being done with the surgeon who's using maybe a robotic arm or some sort of technical device which was not available to his predecessors to do his operations better or her operations better. But it's more, I see a future in which technology and humans will work more closely together as opposed one replacing the other. Thank you for the question, Lloyd. Very good questions so far, by the way, so please do keep them coming, and they can be also more personal ones regarding your own context or situation. Claude Alain asks, we should not devilize automation. It also helps us to focus more important, interesting, and challenging job. Isn't automation an opportunity? Yes, indeed. It's important not to stigmatize automation. It has been proven to free people from mundane work, from dangerous work, as I said. My only concern with automation is to make sure the people who are most vulnerable to it are provided another opportunity, ideally either equal or even better than the one they were doing as a job, I mean, before they were displaced by automation. So my question is, for the future, I'm pro-automation. I think automation should increase. What I'm more concerned about is the lack of national and regional scale efforts to reskill people at scale quickly and efficiently. And the organization I now work for, Generation.org, is doing it, but at the scale that we can do as an international NGO. And we're now working with governments across the world to do it, as I said, more quickly and at scale, because the problem is growing and automation is not to be stopped, and it shouldn't be stopped. We just have to make sure the people who can be left behind are not left behind, and we're helping the most vulnerable ones. Charlotte asks, you mentioned people skills is one of the areas people should focus on for the future. Do you have any advice or thoughts on the best way for people to learn people skills during the pandemic? Well, it's a very good question, because during the pandemic, indeed, you cannot meet your friends or you cannot do volunteer work face-to-face. And these are obviously the contexts in which you would maybe more easily learn people skills. But ideally, you would have people around you, if not your family or partner. You might at least have neighbors or some people you can interact with and discuss. People skills can be a very important one I didn't mention is listening, which can also be done just by calling somebody or having a video call with another person. So even proximity, physical proximity is not that important. So there's plenty of ways to develop your people skills even during the pandemic. And one people skill that some of us often forget is intrapersonal skills, which one of them is, awareness of your own emotions, your own mind. These are skills which are very important as well, and they're called people skills, because obviously if you're more aware of yourself, you can also become more aware of others. And even solitude can be a great teacher to learn intrapersonal skills, not just interpersonal skills. So I think there's plenty of ways depending on the context you're in, but even technology, as I said, can help to learn people skills in a lockdown. So hopefully I answered your question, Charlotte. Jennifer is asking, what do you think the tools or courses needs to be learned to cope up with automation advancement? It really depends on your industry and your line of work, but the courses are all out there on Coursera, Khan Academy. For, I think there's automation for IT people, but there's also potentially a course on automation for doctors. I'm not aware of all the variety of courses. The idea is that automation will be applicable in different ways in different sectors. What I do recommend you to check, and I don't want to do advertisements for any company, but I would be able to recommend you one, which is great for a tool I mentioned, which is robotic process automation, a tool which is actually used now in healthcare, in business companies across different sectors, and they provide free courses on their platform, which I'm happy to share here in the chat. Again, I'm not paid by them or I'm not doing anything with them, but I just think they're a great organization that is, in a sense, disrupting people from the job market, but they realize the potential of reskilling them in the technology they're using to disrupt them in the first place. So they're helping as much as they're disrupting, and their courses are free on this platform I just shared. So this is just one example of how you can learn robotic process automation tools that can be replicable then across different industries and jobs. But thank you for the question, Jennifer.
But I know that you had spoken a lot about the private sector and what they've done with reskilling and upskilling and things like that. Is there anything that you can speak on with more of the public sector, NGO sector in terms of reskilling?
So more specifically to the NGO sector, when it comes to efforts made by the NGO sector, or can you elaborate a bit more on this, please?
Yeah, I would say more specifically to the NGO sector. I think just from what I've noticed, there's more of a lack of focus on reskilling and upskilling in that sector opposed to other sectors. So I wonder if you know of any countries that have had a focus on that, any organizations or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm already working in an NGO which is present in 15 countries called Generation, which is helping people reskill themselves and then helps them to find jobs, sustainable jobs, relevant jobs for them. Indeed, the NGO sector is the one which is often lacking funding, resources, manpower to do the most work, but it can also offer the energy of the people involved in the sector and their desire to do good to help scale initiatives. The idea I believe in truly is that only multi-stakeholder partnerships can provide a sustainable solution for the problem of reskilling, meaning that we need NGOs like the one I work for to work more with governments and with private sector entities to solve this reskilling puzzle. Any of them working by itself, be it government, private sector, or not-for-profit sector, will not be able to solve it. You can be a Google or a Microsoft and still not be able to scale your initiative if you don't have a government supporting you in one specific country or the other. And obviously, the same goes for an NGO, which if you don't have the private sector funding and the government support, you're again only having maybe a small impact at the local level, which is not bad, but the problem is global, so we have to think global to solve it. Okay. Any other questions? Put them forward. I'm surprised nobody asked me so far about, again, their own context about, what are your personal challenges when it comes to the job market now, or to find maybe employment. Obviously, you can be even more specific if you'd like, and I might be able to provide you with some more specific as opposed to very broad advice and recommendations. So please go ahead. I'm happy to help. Let's see. Okay, a question from Lloyd. Thank you for asking again. In our context, automation is expensive and the barriers are politically unattractive. Okay, I guess the question is coming up. Because this is more of a remark than how it will be, in your opinion, in the global south. Well, how it will be, I guess, I'm gonna maybe give a rough guess how it's going to be in the global south when it comes to automation. Well, automation is becoming cheaper and cheaper, and it's implemented by large companies who have operations in the global south. So I think it's just a matter of time between some of these roles over there will be automated, and already we see AI being present in Africa via mobile phones, because behind mobile phones there's a lot of algorithmic work and AI powering many of the applications people use in both the global south and the rest of the world. So I think automation is coming there, obviously at a slower pace than maybe a Scandinavian country or the US or Switzerland, but it's coming everywhere, and it's a force which, as I think was mentioned earlier by Claude Alain, we shouldn't stop and we shouldn't be fearful of. We just should manage the way it's being implemented so that it disrupts, but we do help the people who are most disrupted, not just let them be left lagging behind when it comes to opportunities for a job and for a good life. Jennifer, she's saying that she's working for a corporate company, so great. We have a personal question here, I guess. My concern is we can see many layoffs happening in companies after a certain age, maybe 40 plus. Will still be there's scope for those people in corporate companies? Yeah, it's a good question, because even the NGO I work for realized after initially we started to help people who are young, under the age of 30. So we were initially branded as an NGO helping young unemployed people across the world. Now we recently not rebranded ourselves entirely, since we're still mainly helping young people, but are in the process of helping more and more mid-career professionals, people over 40, who are working again in factories and other jobs which are more physical or clerical roles that are either already displaced from their jobs or in the process of being displaced. And the challenge with them, and the challenge with these types of people, there's definitely a bigger complexity to it, because there are people who have probably dependents, so children to take care of, people who might have mortgages to pay. So it's a very different ball game, if I may say so, when it comes to retraining or reskilling a young person who has also a different appetite maybe of learning than somebody that is at 40 and maybe is less used to going again, in a school format, even if it's an online school format, to learn for hours a day about a certain new topic. So plenty of challenges, but indeed more attention should be paid to this target audience, and very important by companies to realize that it's easier for them to upskill people above 40 than to fire them and hire new people. It's always the cost for upskilling is lower than the cost for hiring somebody new. So job retention, I think, should be key for most companies, and retraining people should be the focus of any manager or CEO, in my opinion. And I think as a fun recommendation, you should watch The Intern, the movie, which shows that it doesn't matter what age you have, you can always still learn, you can always still provide quite valuable input to a company, even as an intern, because I guess with age expectancy growing every year and with our lives being longer, there will be a time in which maybe we will be interns at 70, and to do it maybe not for the money if we're lucky, but just because we need something to give us meaning to life. Work does give us meaning, so why not? And yeah, I see Lloyd has seen the movie, so maybe it's a glimpse to the future. Maybe it's going to be more people like that in the future that do it, especially for the fun of it, ideally, not for lack of money or any other sort of problematic reason. So I'm glad this movie resonated with so many people. I'm happy you've all seen it, and yeah, let's hope we're gonna all be as willing to continuously learn throughout our lifetime as not Al Pacino, what's his name? Robert De Niro is in the movie. Other questions? And I'm glad Jennifer already kind of opened the door to what she's experiencing in her daily life, in her work at the corporate company where she's employed. So if there's other such examples with questions related, please do share, as we're getting into the zone I wanted to get us in, the really concrete one.
And I did want to let you know that we do have about 15 minutes left in our session. So if I would encourage individuals to ask those specific questions to David now, if you do have those. And I see a question in the chat there again.
Okay, let's see. AI is everywhere, in our mobile, in our email, everywhere. It would be good to promote the positive side of AI. How do you see the new digital literacy? Well, it's funny you say that, because not as we speak, because I'm not writing it now, but just before this call, I'm actually co-authoring a piece with a senior director from Intel, which is called Building AI Skills for the Future of Work. So I'm now opening the document so I can quote myself, if I may, of what are the benefits of AI, which I identified here, and why should we actually start teaching young people from an early age about AI and algorithms. And the reasons are plentiful. The ones I mentioned in my article, which I think are the most important, is by exposing young people to technical concepts such as the one connected to AI and algorithms, you stimulate their problem solving and critical thinking skills, which are obviously very important across industries. You also help them understand better how data works, how data is captured, collected, stored, and also how it's interpreted. So then this will help them longer term in their decision-making skills. It also can help them become more creative and innovative, because obviously with AI and with coding, you can program things, you can program games, you can program applications. So you have to start thinking outside the box. So there's plenty of good reasons why I think AI has a positive side, and learning about AI should be part of the curricula of most schools and universities, at least the basics of it, so people can understand it. And one such effort, which I highly recommend you to check out, it's called Elements of AI, which was designed by a Finnish university called, I think, University of Helsinki. And it's one of the best, if not the best, basics AI course, free course that is available out there online. And I highly recommend you to check it out. So thank you for the question, Claude Alain. Kulan is asking, regarding young people, once they have acquired certain skills, they will likely change jobs compared to like people who are over 40. Okay, so I'm gonna use my interpretation skills to understand exactly where you're going with this question. But everybody will have to learn new skills, be it younger people or more experienced people, and the idea of continuous learning will be relevant for everybody. Indeed, given our generation of millennials, because I'm still part of the millennial generation, or I'm also part of the millennial generation, the idea is that we have a higher appetite for risk, which means that we will be more likely to change jobs by our own willing, as opposed to somebody who's in their 40s or 50s who maybe didn't have this experience, and maybe only now at 40 or 50 is either forced or by the automation or COVID or other reasons to change jobs, or maybe by life events. Whilst with young people, more and more we change jobs after 2 to 3 years, which is now seen as fairly normal. So indeed, different generations have different appetites to risk, and things are changing. And now more and more employers are seeing as normal for a young person to have, by the age of 30, 2, 3, or even more jobs and internships behind them, as opposed to the past, in which our parents' generation maybe only had 1 or 2 jobs for life. So very different indeed. So I hope I answered your question. If I'm not sure if this was the direction you were referring to, but it was based on my best guess.
Is there anything else that anyone would like David to speak more on, or any specific questions or anything like that? We do have about 10 minutes left in the session.
I can recommend you another resource. I mean, I have plenty of resources to recommend. If there's no questions, I can share them. So since none of you asked about this, but maybe it's a curiosity about how you choose what you want to do in life, which I guess it's a pretty relevant question for most of us in COVID-19 times and beyond. I recommend this concept from Japan called Ikigai, which is a great framework that you can use to really plan your life better, not just your work. It's the literal translation for Ikigai is reason for being. And it's what gets you, up in the morning and motivates you to work. Is it, a job? Is it a hobby? It's ideally an intersection between the two, but it's definitely something you can use to make better decisions about your work and life in the future. And in case there's actually no question, this might actually be quite a nice way to end with this with this particular resource. But there's actually one more from Patrick. How will this past year online impact youth in terms of affinity for tech? More digital literacy skills developed for many, but at the same time, will there be a pushback because of the digital drain of conducting life entirely online? well over a year. So how will this past year online impact youth in terms of affinity for tech? I think young people were already pretty big on tech, if you ask me, especially if we speak about young people in developed countries which have access to technology. Most of them are pretty savvy with their phones, laptops, and like desktop computers. So I would not worry that there's going to be a change in this, probably just an increase. Indeed, all of us probably experience Zoom fatigue, which is across borders and backgrounds. And maybe the drawback to this is that we're going to be more mindful of how we spend our time online whilst the lockdowns or the sort of lockdown measures are lifted in our countries. So maybe it made us more aware of the drawbacks of staying too much in front of the screen, but I don't think it's going to, this number of hours we spend in front of the screen will be reduced much more than what we usually what we used to spend before the pandemic came, which was the usual 8 hours a day, more or less, unfortunately. But I think we're just becoming more aware maybe of how important it is to literally shut down the laptop after a certain time, or maybe not do emails after 7 p.m. or 6 p.m. depending on the case, or to stop working in the weekend if possible. So such things, I think, regarding well-being are or were made aware of because of the lockdown measures and the increase of calls we all had. But I do see the spread of digital tools and technology continuing and accelerating over the next few years. Equally so, the digital well-being component of it. More and more companies like Google, Apple are incorporating in their tools, in their products, digital well-being apps, reminders of when to log off. So I think the increase of use of technology will directly proportionally impact the rise of well-being apps. So at the end of the day, we'll be hopefully more digital savvy and also more aware of how and when we should stop actually being online. Not an easy thing to do, but there's definitely ways around it. And I think we all have seen the social dilemma, or hopefully we have all seen it, because it's an amazing documentary about the dangers of technology, and the person behind it, Tristan Harris, has actually started an entity called, I think it's an NGO called Center for Humane Technology, in which he actually has some great advice for people who want to, as they say, take back control from their devices and focus more on being present. And for those who haven't seen the movie, I'm sharing this page from their site, from Center for Humane Technology, called Take Control. Some really basic but user-friendly tips of what you can do to spend less time online and to be more mindful and present in your day-to-day lives. Thank you for the question, Patrick. It's really a relevant one in this Zoom world we now live in. Any last minute questions? We still have 5 minutes, and I'm happy to use them all if you want me to answer any other questions. If not, I think we can also give you back these 5 minutes, as they say. Speaking of digital detox and Zoom fatigue.
And David, I didn't know in the last 5 minutes if there were any other resources you wanted to share or direct anyone. I know you've been sharing some great ones so far. If there was anything else?
I mean, and this is going to be like the worst ad ever, but I'm going to just refer you to my LinkedIn profile where I share on a daily basis such resources with my followers there. So feel free to connect. LinkedIn is a platform I use to connect with everybody, even if I haven't met or worked with you guys yet. Feel free to reach out. And as I said, I'm very active there in posting resources. I always feel that sharing is caring. So whatever I find useful in my own life, I do tend to share on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect, and to continue engaging after this session on LinkedIn, and hopefully face-to-face at some point.
That's great. Thank you so much. If
there
weren't any other questions, we can definitely wrap up, or I'm happy to give the floor to anyone. I know there's lots of great comments in the chat here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I was just thanking everybody for their questions. It's been a small but very engaging group, so I'm really happy with the session. And what else I can say? Thank you for the invitation, and yeah, the message is to stay safe and to enjoy the summer as much as
Well,
possible.
yes, let's hope outside as much as possible, right? Well,
Indeed,
I will take a
indeed.
minute then to say thank you so much, David. We so appreciate you joining us for the summit and sharing all of your insightful information. I learned a lot, and I know everyone else seemed to as well. So thank you very much. And I'm going to, yeah. And I will let everyone know that as this session wraps up, we do have the plan coming up in the next few minutes. Keynote speakers from Nathan, who's the CEO of Job Malls, and Carlos Sanzi, the Secretary General of the World YMCA. So I do encourage others to go participate in the plenary as well. But thank you again, David, and I do hope everyone has a good rest of the day.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.